The most terrifying man in this story isn't the one holding the knife, it's the one who never raises his voice. Vincent Sullivan doesn't scream, he doesn't threaten, he controls. That's what makes him dangerous. When Emma calls for help, he instantly isolates the scene, controls her behavior, and establishes psychological dominance without saying a single wasted word. But the real pathology sits deeper. Ethan, the wounded son, still protects the father's system even while suspecting betrayal from within it. This isn't just a mafia attack, it's trauma bonding, inherited loyalty, and power so intimate it feels like love.
So it all kicks off with a call. Some guy is bleeding out in an alley next to 5th Street. And this call activates a secret, off-the-books emergency line. After her report, there's a 3-second pause. This girl is clearly built different. That voice belongs to Emma Turner, 28, looking wiped in her uniform as she kneels next to the guy. The orders were clear: no cops, don't touch him, and most importantly, hide his location. Any normal person hangs up, she doesn't. And this is how we get pulled into the city's underworld. Let's break down this insane choice. Emma's #1 rule is a hard pass on engaging strangers in alleys. Not because she's cold, but because she's actually a massive empath. But 12 years working a high-risk job gave her a killer danger dar. She knows bad from a total catastrophe. Her gut feeling was everything. This dude on the pavement, though, he was a whole other level of chaos, enough to make her break her own code. He's face down on the wet ground, one arm thrown out like he tried to block a hit. What freezes her solid is a detail that's totally out of place. His suit is dark and crazy expensive, a wild sight in this garbage alley. She can spot money a mile away, even when it's mixed with chaos. "Hey," she tries, moving in slow. She's been off shift for 11 minutes with just $16 and some soup for dinner. Little did she know that life was officially over. "Hey, you conscious?" Crickets. She kneels, checking his pulse, a skill she learned when her dad collapsed when she was 12. Her first brutal lesson in being totally helpless. She finds a pulse. It's faint and jumpy, but it's there. "Okay," she breathes, trying to get her own lungs working. "Okay, you're still here." She rolls him over and sees it, a huge dark patch of blood soaking through his shirt. Her stomach turns. This wasn't some accident. Someone did this on purpose. "I need to call," she whispers, phone in hand, but a deeper survival instinct just takes over. That gut feeling, you know? Her eyes flick from the blood right back to that fancy suit. She scans the alley. It's weirdly clean, like someone scrubbed it down. She kills the emergency call. Instead, her hand is in his jacket, searching for a wallet, a name, any clue for her next move. The wallet is thick. She opens it, and the driver's license is right there. Ethan Sullivan, age 34. The address is in a super rich neighborhood. The cash slots are empty. But from behind the license, a business card flutters out. It has no name, no logo, just a phone number in gold foil. Below it, 4 words in clean type: "For emergencies only, call." Emma's eyes go from the card to the bleeding man. She picks it up. She dials. It rings exactly twice. A voice answers, "Who is this?" It's not a question. It's a command delivered with stone-cold control. It sounded like a judge about to pass a sentence. "My name is Emma Turner," she says, shocked her voice is steady. "I work at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street. I found a man. He's unconscious in the alley. His ID says Ethan Sullivan. This number was with it. I didn't know what to do. He's bleeding a lot, and I..." "Stop." One word cuts her off flat. "How long since you found him?" 3, maybe 4 minutes. "Describe the bleeding." She swallows hard. "It's..." Her hand presses his side, the heat and slickness making her sick. "It's bad. He needs a hospital." He will not be going to a hospital. The voice is still a flat line. You will not call 911. You will not move him. A short pause. Stay where you are. Speak to no one until my team is on site. Understood? Every single alarm bell in Emma's head is screaming. You don't tell someone to dodge the cops unless the cops are the problem. You don't have teams on standby at 3 a.m. for legit reasons. All her internal alarms are blaring at once. She stays on the line. Is that understood, Miss Turner? Yes, she replies. Perfectly. 4 minutes. Then came the part that would be burned into her brain. He didn't hang up. The line was open. He was silent, his breathing like some kind of audio surveillance, like he weaponized silence itself. Emma knelt in the cold, listening to a stranger breathe, and waited. At the 1 minute and 40-second mark, Ethan Sullivan wakes up. And it's instant, skipping all the groggy parts. It's the wake-up of someone trained to never show weakness. His eyes snap open, scanning the scene before his body's even fully online. His gaze finds Emma and locks on with an intensity you could feel. Don't move, she says, her voice low and steady. You're injured. Help is on the way. Who? He rasps and coughs. Who did you call? The number from your card. The change in his face was total. All confusion evaporated, replaced by an emotion she couldn't read. It was a mix of cold calculation, raw fear, and total resignation. A look that gave her the first true sense of how bad this night really was. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with a grip like steel. How long ago? He demands. 2 minutes, maybe less. Did he answer, or was it one of his guys? He answered himself. Ethan's eyes squeezed shut, his jaw clenching hard. He was accepting what she knew was a terrible, unavoidable fate. Okay, he whispered. Okay. Listen to me very, very carefully. I'm listening. In about 2 minutes, cars will be here. You will see unknown men do things that will freak you out. His eyes opened, pinning her down with his stare. You must show no fear. Do you get me? Who are these men? Can you do this? Yes or no? Emma met his gaze. 12 years of handling messy situations had taught her one vital skill. It was composure, the ability to be terrified on the inside, while looking completely calm on the outside. Yes, she said. He gave a small nod, his face softening with what looked like regret. I'm sorry that you were the one who found me. She couldn't even answer before 3 black SUVs with no plates rolled into the alley in perfect tactical formation. The move was obviously rehearsed. Big silent men got out, their movements so efficient it was like wasted motion wasn't a thing they understood. They moved on Ethan, ignoring her completely, assessing him with clinical focus while talking in some clipped shorthand she didn't get. One of them finally looked at her, his face a total blank. Step back, he commanded. She did. Then a 4th, bigger vehicle arrived. Its passenger moved with a different kind of power. He had a center of gravity that made everyone else look like they were in his orbit. He was an older man with silver hair and a dark overcoat. His eyes landed on Ethan, then swept the alley. In that one split second, before the mask of control snapped back on, Emma saw it, the pure, unfiltered terror of a father. Then the look vanished, and Vincent Sullivan walked to his son. Ethan! He knelt, touching his son's cheek in a gesture so quick and private Emma had to look away, feeling like she was crashing a sacred moment. I'm fine, Ethan said. You are not fine. Vincent stood and turned, his eyes locking on Emma as if he'd known she'd be there all along, like he knew the exact piece of pavement she would be standing on. He walked to her. Emma had dealt with intimidating guys before, drunks and creeps at her diner counter. She knew how to hold her ground. She held it now. "You are the woman who called," he stated. It wasn't a question. Yes, Emma Turner. He already knew her name. He'd known it the second she said it on the phone. "Yes, sir." Vincent Sullivan sized her up like you'd check a contract for a hidden trap, looking for any weakness. She did not look away. Ethan's warning was screaming in her head as she locked eyes with Vincent. What did he say when he woke up? Vincent's question cut right through the tension. The interrogation was on. She had a single racing heartbeat to invent a story. "He asked if I was unharmed," she said. He seemed confused, like his memory of it was broken. For 4 long seconds, Vincent's stare drilled into her, a textbook power play. Every second felt like a physical weight. "Is that all?" he asked. "That is all." A silence stretched on, and then the tiniest flicker of an emotion crossed his face. His stare had no warmth, no praise, just a cold, analytical assessment. It was the look of a master of lies who just heard a story he could work with. For Emma, it was impossible to tell which was the deadlier situation. "You made the right decision, and my son is alive because of it," Vincent said, his voice heavy. "In every way that matters," he added after a beat. "That is something I do not forget." The words just fell out of her before she could stop them. Pure instinct over caution. I was not trying to be memorable. A reflex born from pure honesty, from someone who can't play a part. A flicker of something crossed Vincent Sullivan's face, barely there. "No," he admitted slowly. "I suppose you weren't." He turned, his voice shattering the silence with commands. His crew moved with terrifying speed, getting Ethan onto a stretcher and into a long, black SUV. The entire scene was wrapped up in less than 3 minutes. Emma stood like a statue, a ghost in the alleyway, her face a total blank. As he got in the car, Vincent looked back. "Go home, Miss Turner. You'll be hearing from us." She made her legs move, fighting the urge to just run. She walked 6 blocks, took the stairs, got into her apartment, and just collapsed in a chair, still wearing her coat. The clock on the microwave read 2:49 a.m. It felt like a decade and 32 minutes had just gone by. She was totally adrift, floating between thought and feeling, when her phone buzzed on the table. Unlisted number. Her heart slammed against her ribs once, hard before she answered. "Miss Turner, Vincent Sullivan, secure line. At 2:49 in the morning, I had to confirm you were back." An ice-cold feeling spread through her. "How did you know I was home?" A moment of silence. The timing suggested it was likely. Her eyes scanned the street below, looking deceptively normal under the yellow streetlights. After a long pause, she said, "I'm home." "Good." A heavy silence hung in the air. "When he's recovered, my son will want to show his appreciation. I assume you'll allow it." Every part of her was screaming to say no, to cut this off right now. Her survival instincts were blaring. "Of course," she heard herself say, the classic response of a trapped animal. "Good." The next pause felt even bigger, more planned. "Miss Turner, one last thing." "Yes?" "About what you told me, about Ethan's words, I accepted your version of events." She didn't respond. "It is vital you know I accepted it," he went on, "because I chose to." Do you catch my meaning? In her freezing apartment, Emma sat like a stone carving, her hands balled into fists. She caught it all. The subtext was loud and clear. He knew it was a lie, and he let it slide on purpose. His choice was a straight-up power move, a maneuver that now tied her to him with a debt she never agreed to. "I understand," she breathed out. "Good night, Miss Turner." "Good night, Mr. Sullivan." For a long time after, she didn't move. A drink got cold on the table. Food wasn't even a thought. The city hummed its usual rhythm while, in some alternate reality she'd just broken into, the man she pulled back from the edge was being pieced back together. She turned her hands over in her lap, looking at them like they belonged to someone else. These were the hands that found a pulse on a strange man's neck, that held a business card with a gold leaf number. They had pressed down on a wound while a voice demanded she stay quiet and still. She took a look at the quiet life she had so carefully built, and she knew in the 3 a.m. silence of her kitchen that it had just been demolished. The question that kept her awake wasn't what she did, but what was coming for her next. An answer she felt was on its way, ready or not. The next morning, she went to her job. What else was she going to do? Stay home and obsess over a guy whose voice felt like a splinter of glass in her mind? For 11 years, Emma Turner had never been late on rent. Her method for survival was simple. She showed up. So she showed up. Murphy's Diner at 6:45 in the morning had that smell of burnt coffee and the fragile hope you only find before 7 a.m., before the day gets a chance to go bad. Emma tied on her apron, refilled the coffee, and built a mental wall against any thought of Vincent Sullivan. She would not think about the alley. Or Ethan's hand grabbing her wrist, his voice out of the dark. "I'm sorry it had to be you." Her mind became a fortress, focusing only on the order for table 4 and the busted fryer. This hardcore emotional defense held up until 9:17. That's when the black car appeared. It didn't park, it just stopped at the curb, perfectly framed by the window where she stood with a coffee pot and a fake smile. It waited, its windows like polished black mirrors, and Emma kept pouring coffee for Mr. Delgato while every alarm in her system was silently screaming. "Sweetheart, you're pouring too much," Mr. Delgato said gently. She stopped pouring. "My mistake, Mr. Delgato." When she looked again, the car was gone. It was nothing, she told herself. Just some other dark sedan with tinted windows in a city full of them. Cars pull up to diners all the time. She repeated the logical excuses, one after another, and didn't believe a single one. At 11:40, her phone buzzed. Unknown. Her stomach did a nosedive. She went into the back hallway, into the smell of bleach and old grease, and answered. "Miss Turner." The voice wasn't Vincent's. This one was younger, smoother, with a politeness that was clearly manufactured. "My name is Daniel. I'm with the Sullivan family. Mr. Sullivan has arranged a meeting for this afternoon." "This afternoon," she repeated, the words feeling hollow. "Correct. Mr. Ethan Sullivan would like to speak with you, set up by Mr. Vincent Sullivan." "My shift ends at 3, Emma answered flatly. A short pause. "Excellent. 4 o'clock is perfect. A car will be sent to the diner." "A car isn't needed. I can just—" "A vehicle will be at the diner," Daniel said again, the pleasant tone now backed by the finality of a vault door closing. "We'll expect you at 3, Miss Turner." The line went dead. In the back hall of Murphy's, Emma stared at her phone. The only sane option was to go back to work. The luxury of a quiet freakout wasn't on the menu. At 2:55, while she was refilling napkin holders, the door chimed. The man who walked in was a major glitch in the diner's boring scenery. It was more than the perfect suit or the vibe of a guy who brings his own atmosphere. It was his eyes. Dark and quick, they scanned the room before they locked onto her with the cold precision of a targeting system. "Miss Turner," he said, "I'm early. I trust that's not an issue." This was not the guy from the phone. This was Ethan Sullivan, rebooted and worlds away from the broken mess in the alley. He gave off a power that felt like it could bend the world around him. "You look a lot more," she started, "upright than our last meeting." "Yes," he said, a faint smile on his lips. He just stood there, asking for a piece of her time. In a flash, she saw herself through his eyes. The apron with food stains, the diner smell clinging to her, a pen behind her ear, a grease smudge on her arm. She was totally unprepared, totally outclassed. "Give me 5 minutes," she said, her tone an order, not a request. Turning away, she told her manager about a family emergency in a steady voice. In the back, she splashed water in her face, meeting her own eyes in a cracked mirror for 10 seconds, pulling together the broken pieces of her composure. To her reflection, she whispered, "You're fine." A lie her own eyes refused to buy. The mantra, "You're fine. He's just a guy," was a weak attempt to shrink his massive presence. When she came out, Ethan was waiting with coffee he'd gotten the 5 minutes she was gone. He stood when she came over, an old-school, polite move that felt like an electric shock. "You didn't have to come in person," she remarked. "I'm aware," he said, his eyes locking with hers. In the dim diner light, she could see the map of his trauma, the exhaustion etched in his face and a jaw clenched against the pain. "I rarely do things I'm not required to," he said, making it clear his visit was a deliberate choice. Emma slid into the booth, trying to level the playing field and calm the shaking in her hands. Her question, "How bad was it?" was met with a cold rundown of his injuries. 2 broken ribs, a cut needing 22 stitches. He admitted it looked bad, and she confirmed she thought he was a goner. This shared near-death experience was why he came. "It's why I'm here," he explained. In 30 minutes, she had both saved his life and lied to his father, a combo he felt required this face-to-face. He put the word "lied" on the table between them, totally raw. He knew exactly what she did and what it implied. She tried to soften it, calling it just leaving things out. "I merely withheld the full details." In Ethan's world, that distinction meant nothing. He then revealed his hand, showing he'd already figured out her motives, making her explanation pointless. The only sign he was rattled was his hands moving in the mug. He had her pegged perfectly. A woman who acts fast and holds her nerve under fire. So get this. He was floored by how she kept her cool during the attack, analyzing the situation when anyone else would be freaking out. She chalks it up to 12 years of crisis management. She hits him with, "I've had practice," and he's right back with, "So have I," hinting at his own crazy survival story. In the silence, you could tell they just got each other. Then she asks if the hit was random, even though she already knew the answer from how he reacted to that VIP call. She just needed him to say it. He gave her one word. No. It was a targeted hit. He finally gets that the attackers used a secret protocol, a trap sprung by that specific phone number. His face goes cold, filled with a new kind of respect. "You figured that out," he says, not even a question. She breaks it down. He asked when she called, not if, which screamed that the call was the trigger. The ambush, she figured, was a bait and switch to trap either his dad or him. Both options meant there was a rat in the house, someone with inside info. Across the table, Ethan Sullivan sets his mug down, his face a complete stone wall. "You are not what I expected," he admits, probably thinking she'd be a crying mess. "Oh, I'm terrified," Emma shoots back, her voice solid rock. "I'm a professional at being scared. I just refuse to let it show on my face while I'm talking to you." Her total command over her own fear just shatters his composure. His tough guy mask cracks, and for a split second, you see the actual dude underneath. The guy made by his family's blood and business. For a flash, she saw the real Ethan Sullivan. Then he drops the bomb. "My father wants another meeting." Her whole world just stops. A formal one, at the house tonight. He rebrands their first encounter as just a field assessment, not a real meeting. This next one is the real deal, disguised as a thank you, but really a deep psychological probe. Ethan chooses his words like a surgeon. He needs to understand you. The diner noise just fades out. "Understand me," Emma repeats, the words feeling heavy. Ethan nods. "You know things now. My father has to know the kind of person who'd make that call." She looks around at her normal life, the coffee machines, the cheap menus, the regulars. A world completely split in two by him. She pushes back, testing the cage. "And what if I say no?" Ethan's answer is calm and brutal. "You can say no, but I can't lie. There will be consequences." If she bails, his dad will just fill in the blanks with his own dark theories. And that alone would guarantee a nasty response. "So, there's no real choice," she says, seeing the endgame. "There's always a choice," Ethan corrects her. "My family just specializes in taking most of them off the table." His raw honesty makes her laugh, a real laugh that seems to shock him. Finally seeing the whole board, she gives in. "Fine, what time?" 7. "A car will be sent." Then he reveals he came alone, that his dad has no idea about this secret pre-meeting. You could see him tense up, a tiny tell that he's risking his own neck here. "He doesn't know you came here first," Emma points out. "Correct." She pushes him on why, and he looks her dead in the eye. "Because I needed to talk to you before he did." He hesitates, the next part costing him. "So, whatever he asks tonight, you can tell him the truth about what I said in the alley. I'll deal with the fallout." This is a wild tactical move. "You want me to tell him the truth?" she asks, totally floored. "I want you to be free of having to lie for me," he clarifies. Her mind is racing, rewriting everything she thought she knew about him. He was handing her the truth to protect her, freeing her from a lie she invented to protect him. "Why is this so important to you?" she demands. "I know the price of keeping secrets from my family," he answers. He ends the conversation by standing up and dropping a ridiculous amount of cash for his coffee, shutting her down before she can argue. "I didn't want that burden to start for you because of me," he says, walking away. She stops him at the door with a sharp, "Mr. Sullivan?" She asks the one question that was hanging between them. "What did you say in the alley? The part you don't want your father to know." The whole diner felt like it held its breath. From the doorway, Ethan meets her gaze and says, for her ears only, "I said I didn't know who was responsible, but I had a pretty good idea." A beat of silence. "And I said I thought it was an inside job." Then he left, leaving her with the crushing weight of that secret. She was now holding the intel that there was a traitor inside a killer mafia empire. It all kicked off in an alley, with Ethan Sullivan bleeding from a wound given to him by a guy he considered a brother. His dad, the boss Vincent, was clueless that his own son had already did the snake in their garden. That poison knowledge was then handed off to Emma Turner, a waitress making $6 an hour. Her response was a masterclass in keeping it together. She finished her shift, cleaned her tables, and waited. The black car showed up at 6:55. She didn't even glance at the plate, knowing it was a burner detail. Getting in was her call, and Emma Turner isn't a woman who looks back. This rock-solid nerve always came after a silent, internal war of what-ifs. In the car, she watched her regular neighborhood morph into a world of money and power, crossing a line she could never uncross. Ethan's words about his family limiting the options hit different now, a perfect, chilling description of a world built to trap you. She saw how tangled she was, all starting with that one damn phone call. The destination, though, wasn't the flashy gangster mansion she pictured. The house was a classy brownstone, its quiet elegance screaming old money power, a perfect mask of normalcy. A sweet old lady who gave off major grandma vibes answered the door. Her name was Rosa, and her welcome felt a little too practiced, a little too perfect. As Emma walked in, the massive door clicked shut, the sound cutting her off from her old world for good. At that moment, at 6:58 on a Tuesday, Emma knew her life had just been split in two. Before this, and whatever the hell was coming next. With a calm, measured move, she followed the attendant. The woman, Rosa, moved so smoothly it was like she was a living part of the house. Emma's professional instincts screamed that something was off with the architecture. The inside was way bigger than it looked from the street. This was a deliberate mind game, designed to mess with a visitor's head and send a clear message. Nothing here is what it seems. Rosa stops at a set of huge double doors, knocks twice, and gives Turner a smile that was somehow both warm and completely soulless. A master-level creepy contradiction. After saying no to a drink, Turner was left in the silence. She took one deep, steadying breath to crush her fight-or-flight response, then opened the doors herself. It was a tiny power move in a place where she had absolutely none. Vincent Sullivan stood at a window with his back to her, a pose of pure dominance that made her cross his room on his terms. The heavy silence that followed was a flex, a non-verbal way of saying he was the main character, a message she received loud and clear. When he finally turned, he was more composed than in the alley. She filed it away. The alley guy was the raw version. This was the polished, finished product, a scary display of self-control. Only his eyes were the same as the alley, still scanning and analyzing her. The layout of the chairs, with no desk between them, was a deliberate move. A fake intimacy designed to make her let her guard down. No barriers. He started not with a question, but with a fact, a play to show he had all the cards. Emma blinked, realizing his son had already told him she'd initially refused the car. "My son, in time, tells me most things," Vincent says, his voice flat. That little phrase, "in time," was a dark hint about how he gets his information. He then tells her to replay her conversation with Ethan. Her mind spun, weighing Ethan's request to tell him the truth against the very real danger she was in. She chose her words like she was walking on glass. "He said thank you," she started. "He mentioned his wound and this meeting, and he asked me to tell you the truth of what he said in the alley." The room plunged into a weaponized quiet, a silence Vincent Sullivan used like a scalpel. "He did," he stated, less a question and more a final confirmation. "He said he knew someone was listening, thought it was someone on the inside," Emma reported, her voice going into full-on de-escalation mode. It was a vocal shield, putting distance between her and the bombshell she'd just set off. For 6 solid seconds, Vincent was a statue, cranking up the psychological pressure to the max. Then he moved to the window, turning his back to hide his reaction to the confirmed betrayal. She was watching a man's entire world get a crack right down the middle. "He told you this?" he asked the glass. "A woman he met 4 hours ago." "I think he told me because I was a woman he met 4 hours ago," Emma shot back, her logic on point. "I'm a waitress. I've got no skin in the game. Telling me cost him nothing in your food chain." He spun to face her, wearing the expression of a king who's just heard a nasty truth from a peasant that his own court was too terrified to say. "You're more observant than you look," he noted. "I look exactly like I am," she replied, shutting down his attempt to label her. "You're the one who decided it meant something." That direct hit earned her a ghost of a smile, a quick, real flash of respect. That, she knew, was 100% genuine. He took his seat again, shifting gears from an interrogation to a simple inquiry. "Tell me about your life," he said, the pure curiosity in his voice catching her off guard. "There's not a whole lot to tell." "The people worth knowing always say that," he answered and started to dig. She'd been at the diner for 12 years, starting when she was 16. "My mother got sick. We needed the money." She delivered her personal history like a field report. Dad dipped at age 8. Mom died 4 years ago. "It's just me." To Vincent, this wasn't a tragedy. It was a tactical asset. When he asked why she was there, she said it was routine. "It's my shortcut home. I've walked it 1,000 times." "And you stopped." "I stopped. I don't know why. I just did." In a final power play, Vincent claimed control of her own instincts, saying, "I do." Emma held her ground. In his playbook, she didn't have the cold-blooded mindset needed to survive, a fact he laid out clinically. She admitted this trait had been a problem before. He then twisted her compassion, turning it into a debt by connecting it to his son's survival. The vibe in the room instantly shifted. The phrase, "my son's life," wasn't a statement, it was a chain, locking her into an obligation. Her first question was about the son's condition. "Angry," Vincent stated, which he clearly saw as a win. For Ethan, pain was a retreat, but rage was a sign he was still in the fight. Some unreadable emotion crossed his face. "He'll be fine." He then called her out on her quiet, "I'm glad." "Yes," she confirmed simply. Vincent then slumped, performing a deep exhaustion, a strategic shift from untouchable emperor to weary father, trying to get her to lower her defenses. The exhaustion seemed to radiate from his bones. His question was blunt. What was she planning to do with the information she had? Her answer was a hard no, an attempt to retreat back to her normal life. She wanted nothing. No cash, no connections, no future role. Her part was done. She refused to be a pawn on his chessboard. Vincent answered with a loaded silence, using the quiet itself as an instrument of pressure. The ticking of a clock was the only thing moving in the room. He presented a twisted paradox. Her denial was exactly what a clever mole would do. "I can't prove what I'm not," Emma replied, seeing his logic trap. He then put on a show of choosing to trust her, a classic move to fake an alliance before dropping an inescapable truth. Her intentions, he clarified, were irrelevant. She was already a player in a game she never signed up for. She understood completely. A cold, sharp clarity washed over her. She heard his words not as a threat, but as a simple statement of fact. She started listing the evidence against her. Knowledge of the attack? Being in his sanctuary? Talking privately with the target? In Vincent Sullivan's world, those facts mattered more than motive. Others, without his reasons to hesitate, would jump to their own deadly conclusions. "I'm a loose thread," she said, realizing an enemy might find her first. Vincent's expression was a blank slate. "You aren't what I expected," he remarked, echoing his son and showing they shared the same rigid way of judging people. "What were you expecting?" she asked. She confessed she'd anticipated a bribe and had already game-planned the internal war between her principles and her poverty. A faint smile returned. And which would have won? "Probably both," she admitted with brutal honesty. "I'm efficient," she added. Vincent stood, and the room's energy screeched to a halt. "I'm not offering you money," he stated. "I'm offering you something else." He called for Rosa, who appeared with silent speed. His low-voiced talk with her was pure theater, an invisible wall that reinforced Emma's status as an outsider under his absolute command. Rosa gave a single nod and left. Vincent refocused on Emma. "I want you to have this number, my personal line." He told her to call if she noticed anything remotely weird, a command meant to breed paranoia. "Do you think I'm in danger?" she asked. "I think," Vincent said with chilling clarity, "I would rather you could reach me in 30 seconds and not need it than the reverse." At that exact moment, Ethan appeared in the doorway, his face a perfect picture of shock. Emma got it immediately. Ethan knew about a meeting, just not with her. His mind was racing, trying to piece it all together. "You told him," Ethan accused her. "You ordered me to," she countered. An entire conversation passed between father and son in total silence. "Who do you believe it was?" Vincent's question hit with physical force. The tiny hesitation before Ethan answered was the answer. He was calculating what truths were safe to tell. "Not in front of her," Ethan said, dismissing Emma with his eyes. "She remains," Vincent commanded. "She is a civilian," Ethan shot back. "She stopped being a civilian when she dialed my number," Vincent declared, implying Emma knew the stakes. He held his son's gaze. "She remains." Emma watched the silent power play, dissecting a world where stillness was a weapon and every second counted. She met Ethan's glare, not apologizing for his father's order. "Caruso," Ethan finally spat out, testing the name on an outsider. Vincent then gave her the rundown on Caruso's recent power grabs. "You said to wait." Ethan's tone was tight with anger. "I stopped waiting. I acted last week without sanction," he confessed, the wound in his side proof of his insubordination. "You acted?" Vincent repeated, the words slow and heavy. "Without my approval." "Yes." The silence that fell was thick with a 34-year history. This was officially way beyond business. "Why?" Vincent asked, the quiet word landing like a haymaker. "Because I knew you would say no," Ethan replied. The look on Vincent's face wasn't rage, but the deep-seated grief of knowing his own heir saw his judgment as a roadblock. It was the pain of a man seeing a reality he had tried hard to ignore. "You suspected," Vincent stated, "that Caruso had someone on the inside." Ethan's silence was his confession. Vincent turned away, his body rigid as he started the hard work of remapping his entire world. "How long?" he asked. 4 months, Ethan answered. The number seemed to land on Vincent's shoulders like a physical weight, a measure of his son's secret war. "And you said nothing." "I lacked proof," Ethan fired back. Only a pattern, a suspicion, and a knife between my ribs. His voice cracked. I didn't want to be wrong, Dad. Using that title was a tactical pivot from soldier to son, a plea for understanding instead of punishment. The change was obvious to Emma. Vincent turned back, his face a mix of total authority and fatherly love, a combination she now understood was his default mode. After a long moment sizing up his son, his attention snapped to Emma. Miss Turner, I owe you a formal apology. She just blinked. For what? For the situation you are now trapped in. He held her gaze. You wanted a simple shortcut and found a variable I can't guarantee your safety from until I know its full scope. He paused. For that, I am responsible. It is not the reward a good deed deserves. Emma looked at Vincent Sullivan, finally connecting the man here to the one Ethan described at the diner. Listen, I never wanted to drag you into this because of my mom. The two guys, worlds apart, were suddenly on the same page. Protect the civilian caught in the crossfire. Save the apology, Emma shot back. We'll see who's sorry when this is over. Vincent just stared at her. We, he whispered. She felt the weight of that word and didn't flinch. Yeah, we, she confirmed. And just like that, in a quiet house, a waitress drew a new line in the sand while the city slept on. Clueless, her 11 years of laying low, up in smoke, a flash of a shadowy dude and the feel of that fancy card came rushing back. The thought hit her. Sometimes the craziest shortcuts take you to wild places, and a second later, and maybe that's okay. She bounced from the Sullivan place at 9:47 and was back at Murphy's Diner by 6:15 the next morning, playing the part of boring old Emma Turner. She was the kind of person who survived insanity by clinging to the mundane, 'cause the landlord doesn't care if you're in a mob war. But the whole game had changed, and she was starting to see the glitches in the matrix. The black car from yesterday was now a silver one. New model, different plates, parked a little further away. It was there when she clocked in, and still there on her break. By her 1100 hours check-in, a whole new vehicle had taken its place. If Vincent Sullivan hadn't put her on high alert, she would have been totally oblivious. But she wasn't. She knew better than to call it in, though. Reporting something she could handle would just make her look like she was panicking. And freaking out was a type of surrender she was not about to entertain. She mentally logged the intel. She stuck to her routine. She watched. At 1300 hours, a guy took a stool at the counter, ordered a coffee, and dropped a $20 bill for a $7 check without even looking at her. Emma refilled his cup twice like a total pro, clocking his tactical position. Back to the wall, clear line of sight to the door, textbook training for handling public threats. After he ghosted, she found a folded note right under his cup. With the slick move you'd use to sweep away crumbs, she palmed the note and tucked it into her apron. Unread. She went on to handle table 6, top off the shakers, and only then did she slip into the quiet of the service hall. 4 words written in a brutally precise hand laid out a chilling order. Don't go home tonight. For exactly 10 seconds, Emma was a statue in that hallway. Then, folding the note back into a perfect square, she walked back out to the floor, where 4 tables were waiting and the lunch crowd was an audience she refused to break down in front of. At 1400 hours, she made a call to Vincent from the walk-in freezer, the one spot with 0 chance of listening ears, a room smelling of cold and secrets. He picked up instantly. The note, she said, cutting straight to the chase. Was it from you? A heavy silence hung in the air. No. A cold dread twisted in her stomach. A guy left a note. It says, "Don't go home tonight." Describe him. She gave a perfect report. His build, where he sat, the 20 for a $7 coffee. She could faintly hear Vincent relaying her intel to someone else in the room. The reply came back fast and tight. Emma. Hearing her first name from him was like a small explosion. He'd never used it before. Confirm you're still at the diner. Affirmative. My shift ends at 1500 hours. You're not leaving at 1500 hours. You stay inside until an operative contacts you. A beat. You do not go with anyone who doesn't use the passcode November. Acknowledge. November, she repeated. Got it. Don't let fear make you sloppy. I'm not sloppy, she snapped back, then corrected herself. I'm scared, but I'm still functional. On his end, there was a sound that might have been a quick, impressed huff of air. Functional is all we need. Stay put. So she did. She started cleaning the coffee machines that were already spotless. She restocked napkin holders that were completely full. When her manager asked if she was okay, she blamed it on a long week. Honey, it's Wednesday, her manager pointed out. Emma shot back, exactly. At 3:22, the door chimed, and in walked Ethan. The sight of him was a total shock. She'd been prepping for some huge silent killer from the alley with a code word and a getaway car. She was not ready for Ethan Sullivan, who looked like he was running on 4 hours of sleep and pure rage. November, he said, cutting right through her thoughts. That's the word, she confirmed. We have to go. Your dad said he was sending backup, but he didn't say it was you. I decided to come myself. He motioned for her to go first. Emma, we gotta move. For the second time in as many days, she ripped off the apron, that uniform of her old life. She spun her manager another lame story about a family crisis, getting a look that screamed skepticism about her life falling apart so fast. Outside, the car was waiting, its engine a low growl. It was an older, forgettable sedan, built for blending in. And surprise, Ethan was the one driving. She jumped into the passenger seat as the world started to blur, the door barely even latched shut. Who sent the note? She demanded. The source is a ghost right now. His eyes were darting everywhere, checking the mirrors with a paranoid rhythm that she was starting to learn was just his default setting. But the delivery guy you described, the method, the skill, that's a professional, a phantom sending a warning, which means they know I was at the alley last night. Correct. And they're trying to scare me. They're trying to erase you, Ethan corrected, his voice flat. Big difference. Scared people make noise. Erased people just go quiet. He locked eyes with her. Someone is cleaning the board before my father finds the rot in our organization. You're a loose end. You knew the risk yesterday. You said pretty much the exact same thing. Because it was true then, and it's even more true now. He changed lanes with a smooth, sharp move. After you left, my father started poking around quietly. He's hunting the traitor in our crew, who's feeding info to Caruso. And now that traitor knows the ground is shaking under his feet. They don't know the details, just that I'm involved somehow. You were one of a few triggers, but your report from the alley, it made our enemy show their hand. He glanced at her. Which was the right call. You need to understand that. But the fallout is that we are officially out of time. And when people get desperate, they get sloppy, which is why I got the note, Emma figured out. She stared down at her hands, perfectly still in her lap. a picture of her apartment popped into her head. The couch, the glowing clock, the window looking out onto a totally normal street. She thought about the quiet life she had built piece by piece, now just another casualty of the last 36 insane hours. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To a safe house, while my father handles the next 12 hours. A short pause. "I'm sorry, I know you didn't choose any of this." "You say sorry a lot." "I've got a lot to be sorry for." "Stop," she ordered. "I made my choices. Don't cheapen them by making this all about your guilt." He looked at her again, the glance holding way longer than a mirror check, stretching into a moment of silent understanding. When he finally looked back at the road, he seemed like a man pulled out of a deep thought. The drive took 20 minutes. The city's crowded streets bled away, then rebuilt themselves into something new. A different neighborhood, a different vibe. Still busy, but quieter. The kind of place where daily routines are a script everyone has memorized. Ethan parked, walked her up the steps of a perfect brownstone, pulled a key from his coat and held the door open for her. "Is this your place?" she asked. "It's mine," he confirmed, making it clear this was his space, not the family's formal estate. The difference between this apartment and the Sullivan mansion was instant and obvious. It wasn't about money, the place was nice. It was about the feel. His family's house was a museum. This was a bunker. Books were stacked sideways on top of other books. A single dirty coffee mug sat on a table. His coat was slung over a chair in a way no maid would ever allow. And to her own shock, a weird and totally inconvenient feeling of safety started to wash over her. Ethan offers her a spot, heading to the kitchen. "You hungry?" Full disclosure, my cooking skills are a crime against humanity. She's running on empty and says, "I'm good." But her stomach immediately calls her bluff with a sharp pain. "Okay, on second thought, I'll take whatever you're making." She hears him rattling around, the fridge humming, a burner clicking on. Crashing onto the sofa, she finally lets the act drop. Head back, eyes closed, she takes 3 deep breaths, trying to push past the panic. "You hanging in there?" Ethan calls out. "Yeah, just talk, about literally anything else." Her eyes are glued to the ceiling. "Tell me something that isn't this." For a second, all she hears is a pan sizzling. Then he says, "I wanted to be an architect." She props her head up. "For real?" "Yeah, till I was 19. I was good at it, the math, the logic. I liked the idea of making something permanent." Another beat. "Then my grandpa got sick, my dad needed my help, and that whole dream went up in smoke." "Do you regret it?" "Sometimes." His honesty is so raw and direct it hits her like a truck. "You ever see a cool building and just wonder, what if?" "I do, but I shut it down fast." He's leaning in the kitchen doorway now. "What about you? What was your plan?" She just looks at him. It's been forever since anyone asked her that. That question died around age 16, right along with wanting anything that wasn't about pure survival. "A teacher," she says. "Elementary school. I used to run a fake class for the neighborhood kids when I was 12, right in my living room." She pauses. "My mom would just watch and smile, not making fun, just loving how serious I was." Ethan's whole face softens, a flicker of unguarded warmth. "So why didn't you?" he asks. "Same reason as you," she says flatly. "Life happened." He just holds her gaze, and for a second, she sees the real guy under all the layers of armor. He's not the analyst, not the soldier. He's something else. Without a word, he turns back to the kitchen. She lets it go. He comes back 10 minutes later with 2 bowls of pasta that, despite his jokes, are actually amazing. Simple, warm, real food. And she is absolutely starving. She demolishes it, too tired for any pretense. They just eat in a silence that is shockingly comfortable. "Damn it," Emma finally says, putting her bowl down. "I need his name." Ethan does the same. He leans forward, elbows on his knees, and the posture is so much like his father's, it's chilling. It's the Sullivan family pose for dropping a bombshell. Marco Caruso runs the East Side, has for about 8 years. He and my dad had a deal, territories, money, the usual mob truce. Everything was stable. Ethan's jaw tightens. Then my father started to pull back. The old man handed off 3 operations last year, and that's when the cracks started to show. Caruso saw this not as retirement, but as weakness, an open invitation to make a move. The attacks were sneaky at first, easy to deny. But Ethan saw the pattern. He knew it was a calculated assault. So he hit back, clinically wiping an entire enemy crew off the map, leaving no trace. A silent message of who was really in charge. He stares at his hands, knowing he should have told his father. But Emma cuts right through his excuse. This wasn't just protection, it was a power play. His eyes snap to hers. She nailed it. She spells it out like a shrink, not a cop. It was a declaration of independence, a move to prove he could operate without his father's backup. The silence is electric. She might have hit too close to home. "Yeah," Ethan admits with a sigh. "That was it. And a rat in my own crew told Caruso what I did, which is why he retaliated. This is ground zero for our whole mess." "Who else knows about this leak?" "My dad's 2 top guys, Luca and Dom, got the brief last night." Ethan's voice gets low and careful. "One guy's been loyal for 22 years, the other for 15. And you trust them?" "They have my father's trust," he dodges. "I asked about yours." Ethan meets her eyes. "I trust Luca." "Dom's a different story, but my gut feeling is all I have, and my dad doesn't operate on gut feelings." A short pause. He needs proof. Emma finishes the thought in her head. Trying to get proof from a guy who knows he's being watched is a total waste of time. Exactly. The meal's over. The apartment is quiet. A car passes outside and she tenses up, holding her breath until the sound fades. "That warning," she starts. "Stay away from home tonight. If it wasn't from your people, it was from Caruso's, which means they know who I am." "That's correct." "So the informant in your organization told Caruso I exist." "Correct." "This means the source knew I was at the estate and that I had a private meeting with your father." She lets that hang in the air. "And now they're terrified of what we talked about." Ethan just watches her, his expression unreadable. "Walk me through it." "The source sees a big shift after last night. They don't have details, but they know this. A civilian woman finds you, gets taken to the big boss for a meeting, and then gets let go. Right after that, your father starts making a bunch of quiet calls." Her eyes lock onto his. "They're not trying to scare me because I'm a threat. They're trying to scare me because they have no idea what I know. And that makes me a massive liability." The silence in the room is so thick you could cut it with a knife. "You figured all that out," Ethan says, his voice low. "In what, 45 seconds?" "I had all day to think," she shoots back. "Lots of downtime between coffee runs." "Emma," he says, trying the name out. "What you just described is called leverage. If the rat is moving because he's scared, then what he thinks I know turns me from a risk into a weapon." She gives a tiny nod. "I'm picking up what you're putting down." We have to tell my father. Make the call. Ethan pulls out his phone. It rings twice before Vincent answers, and Ethan says, "You're on speaker," placing the phone on the table between them. It sits there like a bomb, waiting to go off. "She has a theory," Ethan says. Emma leans in and walks Vincent through her entire logic, just like she did for his son. A cold, step-by-step breakdown. The warning note is just a symptom. The real issue is the informant's panic and the power we get from the gap between what I really know and what they're afraid I know. After she's done, the line is dead silent. "You're proposing," Vincent finally says, "that we use this confusion as bait." "I'm proposing the confusion is already there," she counters. "He's already making his move based on it. The only choice now is if we react to him or if we take control." Another heavy silence. "Dom," Ethan says to his father, his voice soft. "Don't," Vincent cuts in. "Dad, Emma just gave you a perfect profile of someone who knew she was at the house, knew about your calls right after, and had the resources to have her diner watched by 1 p.m. That requires access to your every move. Luca doesn't have that. Dom does." The silence coming from the phone is now a whole new level of cold. In the last 24 hours, Emma had learned the different flavors of Vincent Sullivan's silence, and this one was the absolute worst. This wasn't a strategist thinking. This was a man staring into the abyss of a massive betrayal. 22 years. For 22 years, Dom had been his right-hand man. "I need proof," Vincent says, his voice a perfect, unbreakable mask over a core of total devastation. Emma has to look away from the phone, feeling like she's intruding on a private hell. "I know," Ethan says. "I'll get it. I have a plan." The old man laid it down. He wanted a solid plan, no more solo missions from his son. This was a whole new playbook. After a heavy silence, Vincent gave an order that Emma immediately knew was a bombshell dropped right in the middle of his relationship with Ethan. He demanded to hear the plan first. Watching Ethan, Emma saw the ground cracking between father and son in real time. The fortress inside Ethan Sullivan wasn't being stormed. It was just dissolving like a wall that was no longer needed. "Emma is the stratagem." Ethan dropped the bomb. Emma froze solid. "She's the one wild card they can't predict," he said, locking eyes with her. "The whole game is to let them think their little intimidation tactic worked. She'll go dark, cut all ties with us. They'll never suspect she's a player. In their minds, she's already been filed away as just some waitress from 5th Street. He paused. "And Dom, especially, is gonna look right through her. It's what he does with anyone not from his world." Vincent's voice cut in, sharp. "What's the move exactly?" "A conversation," Ethan shot back. "A completely accidental meeting between Dom and Emma. Somewhere public he'd never flag as a threat. The whole point is to box him into a corner where he has to figure out what she knows on his own. It's a loyalty test designed to make him show his hand by how he reacts." Ethan added, "She's a natural at this, father. Your 60-minute chat with her last night proved it. The line went dead silent for 15 seconds, then 20. Emma counted every single one, trying to process her new job title as the main gear in a machine she hadn't even agreed to turn on." "Miss Turner," Vincent's voice crackled through the speaker. "You there? I'm here. You're not being forced into this. I'm saying that in front of my son so we're all clear." "A beat. But I have to ask you, what's your play?" Emma's mind flashed to the warning note under the cup. She saw the silver sedan that was parked across from her diner. She thought about a guy in Vincent Sullivan's inner circle for 22 years, who for 4 months was feeding intel to the crew that almost put his son in the ground. She weighed the cost of letting that kind of poison spread. She thought of her mother, a woman who lived her whole life by avoiding trouble, a master class in staying silent. And then there was Emma, who just wasn't built that way, who walks toward a dying man in an alley, who tells a mob boss the stone-cold truth, and who in the last 36 hours officially stopped being invisible. "Get me the dossier on Dom," she said flatly. She heard the faintest sound from Vincent, like the air pressure dropped on his end of the line. A 61-year-old dude, total control freak, a narcissist who thinks he can read anyone like a book. Restaurants are his office. He just cycles between the same 3. He's got a reservation at Carmine's on Thursday. "Thursday?" Emma echoed. "That gives us a 2-day window to work with?" "You don't have to do this," Ethan started. "I'm well aware of what I have to do." She cut him off. Her eyes burned into his. "Stop looking at me like I'm some liability about to break. I've spent 12 years handling explosive men in tight spaces. I'm telling you, I can walk into that restaurant and get what you need." She paused. "What I need is every piece of intel you have on him. His speech patterns, his vanities, his triggers, his insecurities, the whole psychological map." She glanced at the phone. "I need that data from both of you." A moment of quiet, then Ethan's voice, almost a whisper. "Agreed." And Vincent followed, his tone changing from calculating to forged steel, an unbreakable promise. "Agreed." Emma leaned back in her chair. Outside, the city just kept moving, totally oblivious. Thursday was in 2 days. She had 48 hours to build the perfect woman. Someone a guy like Dom would see right through, never guessing the reality underneath. For 12 years, she'd been unseen. It was time to find out just how powerful being underestimated could be. For 2 days, time stretched out. A special kind of hell when you're waiting for a fight. On Wednesday, Emma was a zombie at work, putting on a clinic in how to act normal. Her moves were robotic, a series of blank smiles for customers who forgot her face the second they turned away. This was the exact picture Dom and Caruso's crew would expect. A scared civilian who got the message and was staying in her lane. But at night, her kitchen table became mission control, with Ethan's voice a steady data feed over a secure line. She studied Domenico Ferraro, breaking him down the same way she did her job, by pattern, by instinct, and by the unique tells of his ego. At 61, Dom was a relic from the Sullivan organization's old days, a piece of furniture so permanent he'd blended into the background. His caution wasn't fear, it was a deeply ingrained habit, a muscle memory from being close to the throne. He saw himself as the mob's #1 judge of character, a delusion Ethan's intel flagged as his biggest weakness. His fatal flaw was vanity. The man craved public respect and dressed like he was on a stage. He wasn't looking for approval from the young guns, but from experienced women who could appreciate a man of his supposed stature. Since she was 16, 32-year-old Emma Turner had learned to turn the world's assumption that she was just some tired, unremarkable woman into a weapon. She could construct, with terrifying precision, the exact mask a guy like Dom would scan and file away in 30 seconds. "Your goal is not to get information out of him," Ethan's grim voice coached her on Wednesday night. "No direct questions. Just take up his space. Become someone he wants to talk at. Let him be the one to fill the silence. Guys like Dom see a vacuum and feel a need to conquer it with their own voice." "And when the Sullivans come up," Emma replied, knowing damn well they would. He'll bring them up, Ethan confirmed. Show a little fear. Let him think his goons rattled you more than you let on. A beat passed. Faking that shouldn't be too hard. No, she agreed. It won't. Emma. His voice shifted. In 2 days, she'd learned the sound of Ethan Sullivan's voice like a map. She knew that pressure drop meant a storm was coming. This wasn't strategy anymore. This was personal. If it feels wrong, you walk. No excuses, no second thoughts. You get up and leave. Luca is at the restaurant. I know, you've mentioned it 3 times. This makes 4. Ethan! I will be fine. Silence. Get some sleep. You sound dead on your feet. His voice dropped so low it was almost a whisper. You are not required to do this. I know, she thought, that unspoken 4th repetition. Good night. She passed out for 4 hours. She woke at 5, staring into the dark before dawn. In the quiet, she started her mental warm-up for dealing with fear. You look it in the eye, you measure the real threat, not the shadow it throws. Worst case, Dom sniffs out the play, he's smarter than the file says, her cover is blown. If that happens, she gets up and walks. Luca is there, Vincent will clean up the mess. Best case, Dom plays himself. He fills the silence she gives him. His ego, polished by 22 years of being the smartest guy next to the king, slips up and gives Vincent exactly what he needs. Between total failure and a win was the space of a single conversation. Emma Turner had been having high-stakes talks since she was 12, always playing a part. She could do this. She got up, made coffee, and suited up for Thursday. Carmine's was a place that knew exactly what it was. Dark wood, crisp white cloths, and lighting designed to make everyone feel like they were making a backroom deal. Emma walked in at 12:45, a single diner asking for a window table, and was seated instantly, wearing an armor of perfectly crafted confidence. The operative asked for sparkling water, her control absolute. She didn't scan the room, knowing that looking for her backup was a rookie move, a predator like Dom would spot and use against her. At 1:05, the target made his entrance. Dom. The intel was spot on. Softer and heavier than Vincent, with silver hair and a coat that quietly bragged about how much it cost. He moved through the restaurant with the casual authority of a man who owned it, greeting staff by name and nodding at another table, a performance of power she knew was just as much an act as her own. His performance was so good, she bet he didn't even remember the real person under it anymore. He clocked her before he even sat down. She felt his eyes on her for barely a second. The exact amount of time a man like him needs to size someone up and put them in a box. Her own gaze, locked the street outside, was the bait. She timed it perfectly, letting her eyes drift back to his to create the perfect illusion of being caught by surprise. She offered a quick, polite smile, the perfect mask of someone lost in her own thoughts. He parks it at his table with a couple of his goons, but Emma's barely clocking them. She's done with her appetizer when Dom makes his move, sliding up with that practiced, slick-as-oil voice. Hate to interrupt, he starts, oozing charm. But looks like you got ditched. He flashes this disarming grin. Domeno Ferraro, hope I'm not stepping on any toes. She hits him back with just Emma, a total power move. Not waiting, thinking. He points to the empty chair. Mind if I join? She makes him wait just long enough before saying yes. It was the perfect pause, just enough to seem a little unsure, but open, before she gave him the nod. He takes the seat, and a waiter zaps over instantly. He orders without even glancing at the menu, a total flex to show he runs the place. His questions sound casual, like he's some refined, sympathetic dude, but it's all a front. She feeds him a custom-made story, mostly true, so it's easy to defend. Just a waitress having a crazy week. Crazy how, he pushes. His focus like a laser, and there it is. The cold, calculating spy game firing up right under the surface. I had an experience, she says, her voice totally level, dropping her eyes to her glass while her face tells the real story. That tiny bit of tension in her jaw, perfectly rehearsed. Met some people I never thought I'd run into, and I'm still wrapping my head around it. What kind of people? His tone is light, faking simple curiosity. Powerful. Her eyes snap right to his. The kind of power you don't even notice until it's got you cornered. Dom meets her gaze, and she's mentally scanning his reaction like a computer. He wasn't surprised, but his focus got razor sharp, like a predator locking onto a target. Sounds disturbing, he tries. It was eye-opening, she fires back, letting the word hang in the air. I thought I knew how the world worked. I was wrong. A beat passes, and now I know way more than I ever wanted to. 3 seconds of dead silence. What Dom Ferraro did next was basically a written confession she'd later repeat word for word. An innocent guy would have demanded details. Instead, he just smiles, smoothly pivots, and says, "Powerful people wear a lot of hats. A lot of times they're just guys who got really good at one thing early on." He never asked what she found out. He didn't push for a single name. With the kind of skill he'd polished for 22 years, he completely redirected the flow. In that 1 second, Ethan's theory became Emma's fact. She kept up the act for another 20 minutes, playing the part of a troubled girl, and over her head, she let Dom take the lead, giving him openings he filled with his practiced BS, totally sure he was in control. She was the one who decided when to leave. She nailed the handshake, the smile, and all the polite goodbyes with perfect execution. A total act that hid what she really thought. Her heels clicked a confident rhythm on the pavement, leaving Carmine's. And not even half a block later, Luca just materializes next to her, falling into step like he'd been there all along. "Car's just around the corner," he says, super quiet. "I know," she shoots back. Luca gives her a sideways glance. "I was monitoring the conversation." She stops dead. "You were wearing a wire." Mr. Sullivan wanted confirmation. She filed that info away. Getting angry was a waste of time. Then he already knows. "He's waiting," Luca confirms. Both of them. The dark sedan, the city lights blurring past, the Sullivan mansion, the stone steps, the massive front door. It was the same movie scene all over again. The door swings open before they even reach it. Rosa is standing there waiting. This time, Emma walks inside without even flinching. She knows the layout now, and the fear of that door shutting behind her was gone. Vincent and Ethan were on their feet when she entered. The tension in the room was so thick you could taste it, confirming they heard the whole meeting in real time. The ghost of her chat at Carmine's was still hanging in the air. She took a seat. They stayed standing. "He never asked the question," she reported. "No," Vincent confirmed. "He didn't. He deflected." He used the exact same dodge and weave tactic twice. When she hinted, she knew things she shouldn't, and when powerful people were mentioned. Both times, he yanked the conversation sideways, killing its momentum. An innocent person wants answers. A guilty person changes the subject. "This isn't exactly a smoking gun," Vincent says, his voice cutting like a razor. "No," Emma agrees, but it was like Ethan predicted, a test to either prove he's clean or guilty. He did nothing to prove he was clean. The silence that followed was a black hole. She watched Vincent Sullivan weigh 22 years of loyalty against a 40-minute conversation set up by a waitress over a $30 lunch he paid for. She let that sink in, knowing some truths have to hit hard before they can be let go. From the other side of the room, Ethan's eyes locked onto hers. A silent message passed between them, something way beyond words. It was like two soldiers from opposite sides finally reaching the same ugly truth, realizing their paths were always meant to crash right here. "I have to make a call," Vincent announced. "Excuse me." He left, the door closing with a soft click but not quite latching. Emma could hear his low, steady voice in the hall, saying a name she didn't recognize. He said it again before the sound faded. Ethan crossed the room, taking the chair his father just left. Up close, she could see the bone-deep exhaustion carved around his eyes, the fallout from 4 days of insane pressure. "You were right about him underestimating me," Emma said softly. "I know." It was still infuriating, she admitted, even though it was the whole point of our plan, even though I counted on it. She stared at her hands. "He looked right through me and saw zero threat. It took him maybe 20 seconds. And you used that against him." "I did, but you need to understand what that cost." She met his gaze. "I spent 12 years building the woman he couldn't see. I was just starting to think maybe that act didn't have to be me forever." Ethan's face was so raw, it was almost hard to look at. "It doesn't," he said, his voice quiet. "Have to be." She held his gaze for one more second. With one sharp nod, she broke eye contact, like she was shielding something new and too delicate to be seen. Vincent reappeared, pausing in the doorway. In that split second, Emma saw the father behind the tycoon, the actual person inside the fortress of power. Then his posture straightened, the emotional armor snapping right back into place as he returned to his seat. "The situation is being handled," he stated. Emma knew better than to ask for details. She'd learned there were parts of this world she could access and parts she couldn't. Dom Ferrara's fate was deep in the second category, and she had zero interest in crossing that line. "And Caruso?" Ethan asked. "Caruso is a different war for a different day," Vincent replied, his eyes fixed on his son. A new rule was laid down. Total honesty. No more going rogue. Vincent let the silence stretch out, a space filled with the 22-year baggage of a broken father-son relationship. Ethan agreed to the new terms, meeting his father's stare. The whole atmosphere in the room shifted. A silent agreement that their 34-year dynamic had been totally rewritten by the last 4 days. It wasn't broken, but reforged, now stronger where it had once been cracked. "Agreed," Ethan said again. Vincent nodded, turning his attention to Emma. "Miss Turner," he started, then stopped. He looked at her like a man who'd mastered language his whole life only to find all his words were suddenly useless. "I don't seem to have the right words," he finally managed. "For everything you have done this week, all of it, every single move you've made since the alley." Emma began to say something. "Don't downplay it," he cut in gently. "Let me have this." She went quiet. "You walked into a mess that had nothing to do with you. You then made every single call with perfect precision under insane pressure, with no experience, for no reason other than you just can't stand by and watch someone get hurt." He paused. "You used lies to protect my son. You brought the truth to me in my own home. And today you won a psychological war that men in my world train their entire careers to master. You cracked this with only 48 hours of intel, armed with the quiet confidence of someone who's been underestimated their whole life and learned how to use it like a blade. His tone was low, deliberate, and packed with respect. I owe you. That's not an opinion. It's a fact. Emma took a beat, his words sinking in. A flashback hits. Her mom watching her wrangle all the neighborhood kids. Then another memory, being 16 in a cold clinical room, followed by 12 years of never stopping. A tactic to ignore the walls closing in on her world. Her mind raced through the key beats. A gold card in the dark. The feel of a human pulse. The choice to make a phone call. I need one thing, she declared. Vincent's focus was laser sharp. Anything. When this is over, I mean all of it. Caruso, Dom, whatever comes next. I need to hear from you that it is 100% finished. She took a breath. I refuse to live my life looking over my shoulder for that silver car. You have my word, Vincent shot back, zero hesitation. No pause, no thinking it over. It was the promise of a man who understood some debts can't be paid with cash. She nodded, got up, and grabbed her bag. Her eyes met Ethan's, and she saw the same look he gave her back in his apartment. It was view from behind his emotional barricades, a sight she figured almost no one had seen in a very long time. Next Thursday, he said. She tilted her head, a silent question. I was thinking of dropping by the diner for some coffee. He held her gaze, and that small, real smile reappeared. If you'd be okay with that. Emma Turner studied Ethan Sullivan, the man she'd found bleeding in an alley just 4 days ago. A guy from a world so completely different from hers. She thought about how architects become other things, how teachers start waiting tables, and how a life can just suddenly get knocked onto a completely new track. Thursday, she confirmed. I'll save you a seat. She headed down the corridor. His associate, Rosa, was waiting by the door. The car was already running outside. The city just kept on being the city, massive, uncaring, and filled with millions of separate lives. None are meant to collide, but every single one is just one wrong step away from impact. She slid into the car. She watched the familiar landscape of her neighborhood reappear. Her street, her building, the tiny crack in the wall she'd been meaning to report for 3 months. The corner store where the owner knew her order. Every single detail was exactly as she'd left it. Unchanged. But her internal landscape? It had been totally bulldozed and rebuilt. She didn't have a word for what she was turning into. The not knowing was fine. She'd learned this week that being uncertain isn't the same as being lost. It can be the feeling right before you draw a whole new map, the feeling you get when your life outgrows your vocabulary. She got out of the car. She walked up the stairs. She stepped into the silence of her own apartment. She stood in the normal daylight of a life that hadn't stopped for her but had been completely rerouted. She hung up her jacket, she made coffee. She sat at her kitchen table, hands palm up, and looked at them one final time with the same old questions. What were these hands ever meant to do? What is the whole point of this? What does a woman like me even do? And for the first time in 12 years, she had an answer. She had stepped in. She had walked through the fire. She made the call. She didn't run. She had stared down Vincent Sullivan, spoken the truth, refused to back down, and went into the danger, coming out the other side with her soul intact and the sharp realization that at 32, her life hadn't been a practice run for pouring coffee. It had been for this. The coffee was done. She poured a mug. She sat in the normal quiet of her normal life, which was no longer normal and never would be again. She didn't mourn what was lost or fear what was next. Emma Turner had accepted a lot of things in her life. This wasn't a truce with fate. It was a new reality she would fight to keep every single day. A bigger world, a deeper truth, the version of herself that broke her own programming. She was the one whose fingers trembled on the gold card as she dialed the number that changed it all. She found a life about to be extinguished and yanked it back from the brink. In that one single unplanned act, the drifting ship of her own spirit finally dropped its anchor. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't random. It was the inevitable emergence of the woman Emma Turner was always meant to be. Once the fortress she'd built around herself was finally reduced to rubble.
Life lesson. Trauma does not only wound people, it trains them into patterns they later mistake for personality. From a psychological perspective, the most fascinating aspect of the story is how quickly each central figure reveals a deeply conditioned survival pattern. Emma Turner encounters an injured stranger in an alley and violates her own rule by stopping to help him. This is diagnostically significant. People create rules like do not stop for strangers in dark places for a reason. Such rules are compensatory safety structures usually built from repeated exposure to instability, risk, or the emotional consequences of other people's chaos. Emma has clearly learned caution, yet when she finds Ethan, compassion overrides caution. That does not mean she is naive. On the contrary, she recognizes the danger almost immediately. What it suggests instead is that her pro-social response remains accessible even under threat. This matters because many traumatized or chronically stressed individuals become so over-indexed towards self-protection that compassion narrows under pressure. Emma is different. Her nervous system reads threat, but it does not become fully governed by it. This is the first lesson of the story in psychological terms. The healthiest form of strength is not emotional numbness, but the capacity to remain morally responsive while afraid. Emma's courage does not emerge from fearlessness. It emerges from a still-functioning conscience. Ethan Sullivan presents a very different but equally revealing profile. He regains consciousness under conditions of physical injury and acute stress, yet his immediate concern is not his body. His first question is who has been called. That indicates a nervous system trained to prioritize informational consequences above physical pain. Such a pattern is common in people raised inside high-risk, high-control environments. Their survival logic becomes relational and strategic before it remains bodily. Ethan's fear upon learning that Vincent was contacted is not the fear of a son who lacks attachment to his father. Quite the opposite. It is the fear of a son whose father is both protector and authority, safety and pressure. This combination often produces profound ambivalence. The child learns that love is real but never entirely free. Comfort arrives with surveillance. Help arrives with consequence. Over time, the person becomes hyper-competent, guarded, and emotionally compartmentalized. Ethan's secrecy later in the story confirms this. He suspects an internal betrayal but withholds it until proof feels possible. Again, that is not mere stubbornness. It reflects a world in which truth is dangerous unless strategically timed. Vincent, for his part, embodies the complementary pathology. He clearly loves his son, yet his first mode of response is command, structure, and control. Rather than feeling chaos, he organizes against it. That often looks like strength from the outside, but psychologically it is also an anxiety management system. He dominates uncertainty because uncertainty threatens him. Emma's interaction with both men reveals another crucial life lesson. People frequently carry extraordinary intelligence that goes unrecognized because it was acquired through hardship rather than prestige. Emma is not institutionally powerful. She has no inherited authority, no elite education, no violent training, yet she repeatedly demonstrates refined perceptual skill. She reads the emotional content of silence. She identifies the difference between overt danger and relational danger. She understands when someone is hiding information, when power is being performed, and when a question is really a test. Clinically, one might describe this as advanced interpersonal threat discrimination combined with high observational intelligence. In ordinary terms, it means she knows how to read people, and she knows because life forced her to learn. Years of service work, financial precarity, caregiving, and exposure to difficult personalities can create what privileged contexts often fail to recognize as expertise. Emma is not simply resilient, she is psychologically literate, even if she has never called it that. This is why she becomes valuable to the Sullivan family and threatening to the hidden traitor. Ambiguous civilians create enormous anxiety in paranoid systems, especially when those civilians are difficult to manipulate. Once Emma knows something, even something partial, she becomes a projection screen for other people's fear. The warning note left for her is not merely intimidation, it is an attempt to manage uncertainty. Someone cannot tolerate not knowing how much she understands. By the end of the story, all three major figures have been forced into confrontation with their own adaptations. Emma realizes that what she thought was mere ordinary competence is actually a form of strategic human intelligence. Ethan begins, however, slightly to move away from the assumption that autonomy must always be proved through concealment. Vincent is compelled to recognize that control without emotional trust generates the very vulnerabilities it is meant to prevent. No one is healed in a simplistic sense, and that is precisely why the story feels psychologically credible. Real change rarely arrives as catharsis. It arrives as recognition. A person sees, perhaps for the first time, that what they have been calling personality personality is partly adaptation. What they have been calling strength is partly defense. What they have been calling love is partly fear wearing a more respectable face. That is the final lesson the story offers. Trauma does not always make people cruel, but it often trains them into patterns so deep that they stop seeing them as patterns. Emma becomes powerful because she has not surrendered her moral orientation to fear. Ethan becomes sympathetic because his guardedness is clearly the language of survival rather than emptiness. Vincent becomes tragic because the very traits that allowed him to protect his world have also damaged the intimacy he most wanted to preserve. In that sense, the alley does not create their psychology, it exposes it, and once exposed, each person is forced to decide whether they will keep mistaking adaptation for destiny or begin the far more difficult work of becoming conscious of what it costs to survive in that form.